Welcome back to another episode of Out of the Blank Podcast. Stuart Blues from the British Murders Podcast. I have a lot of questions for you today.
Good. I'm happy.
Do you feel like you'd have a lot of answers? Do you have a lot of answers?
It depends what the question is, but I'm sure I could come up with something to
Our-
answer your questions.
I really want to repeat our last conversation. We're like, gun to your head. So, you know what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
I wanted to ask because I've been kind of down this area. I think a lot of people know about it and they know about the trend, but it's really the true crime obsession. I mean, when you started your podcast, were you aware that there was a true crime obsession? Because this relatively started off probably when podcasts started taking off, which was like really the beginning of the pandemic.
Do you mean a true crime obsession as far as media and podcasting, or do you mean in general?
Media has kind of always had a weird relationship with murder stuff, but I meant more just in the area of like when you started your podcast, were you aware that there was an actual cultural obsession with sometimes mysteries, clues, and just serial killers?
I think I was aware that there was a boom as far as true crime podcasts are concerned because at the time, so I started in 2020, December. And at the time, I listened to loads of true crime podcasts. So it was something I was a consumer of, I guess, although I never paid for anything. Because all the content's free, and I didn't want to pay anyone for Patreon because I'm thrifty, is the word you might understand. I was going to say tight.
Cheap, cheap.
Cheap, yeah, cheap. You could use that word. So I listened to all that stuff. But as far as true crime being obsessed with by people, you can go back over 100 years minimum, especially in the UK with like Jack the Ripper and stuff like that. And we had loads of serial killers that over there you may not have heard of in the 70s, 80s. We had loads of prolific serial killers, as you did in America, just because policing was lax and there was no CCTV, no social media, etc. But yeah, around the time 2020, I think because of COVID and everyone being locked down, there was an absolute plethora of podcasts being started because no one had nothing better to do. So it won't just be true crime podcasting that boomed, but I saw the chance to get involved in a niche that I like, which is true crime, something my mum's always been into. I remember her reading true crime books growing up, and some of them were really thick books, and I'm thinking, Jesus, that's a big book, and watching documentaries on TV and stuff. But I think the boom, in my opinion, is kind of it's peaked, and I think it's on a decline at the moment, especially from an independent person's point of view. So with me, it's just myself. I research it, write it, edit it, market it. It's all myself. If you go on the podcast charts, it used to be littered with independent people who just do their own thing, like myself, or as a partnership with someone. But now it's all studios. Like the BBC, I looked yesterday, they've got about 5 true crime podcasts in the top 20. You've got Wondery, you've got all these big studios launching money into it because they are trying to sort of take advantage. It's like, when people have stock in a company and everyone starts selling the stock really quick to try and make the most of the price, and then the price plummets. That's the only comparison I can think of on the top of my head. So everyone, studios are putting all this money in, not necessarily doing it for the right reasons or doing it well, just trying to capitalize and make money off it. And I think that's having a negative effect with this wave. It's peaks and troughs anyway, but I think it's heading towards a trough at the moment.
You think that's like that with all podcasts, or you think it's just specifically the true crime stuff? Because anywhere you look on Netflix or anything, there's documentaries all about true crime obsessions, and it's kind of like the superhero thing. It's a way to make money. They found out that's a good thing. You can easily make a documentary or just a 30-minute show, whatever you want, and people will grab onto it. But I feel like after a while, you get burnt out from watching it.
Yeah, I mean, I can only speak from true crime because the most popular podcasts in general seem to be celebrities talking about anything from politics to sport, you know, and that's the only two I think of. The ones I listen to, one's about football, soccer, and another one's about entertainment, i.e., TV shows and screenwriting and stuff. They're probably the two most popular podcasts in the UK at the moment. And then you've got one which is just a guy who has guests on who are high profile guests, no particular niche, just anyone that's kind of well known will go on this guy's podcast. I don't know where it's going because people do still watch documentaries and people do still watch films. My concern is that it's not for the right reasons, though. It is kind of getting better, but we need to focus more on the victims rather than the perpetrator. And a lot of these documentaries, I always go back to the Dharma one, focusing on Dharma. It's interesting because you don't meet many serial killers, if ever. And it's not something that happens every day. So people do find it fascinating because it's so outrageous.
I work with the mother of one. I forgot to tell you that.
You could tell me that in a minute. But the fact that that story, for example, was written with so many liberties taken, so many false narratives just to make the show more gripping to the viewer. I watched the show. I enjoyed the show. I'll openly admit that. But from an ethical point of view, I didn't like it. Whereas what they should be doing is focusing more on people who were actually killed by these murderers. Do you know what I mean? I don't see enough of that in mainstream media.
Well, from I guess from a podcaster's background, for you, I would ask you the question, what is your audience base? What do you find them more interested in? What's the criticisms you get compared to the people that give you the compliments on the work that you do?
The, the biggest criticism is my accent, believe it or not.
I love it.
Yeah, thank you. Most people do. But because I drop the letter T in a lot of my words, like there, I've just said a lot of my words, not a lot of my words. A lot
A
of people from
lot.
down, a lot of, you
Oh,
know the meme where you say bottle of water. That that meme that goes around British people. No, we don't say bottle of water. We say bottle of water.
I say bottle of water.
Yeah, but bottle. You put the D in there. There's a term for it. We sort of drop it, and there's a movement you do with your tongue. So it's like a bottle of water.
Bottle.
Bottle of water.
Bottle
Yeah,
of water.
yeah,
Oh,
whatever.
wait.
That. But yeah, I dropped my T's. So if you look at my Apple Podcast reviews, I can only speak for the UK ones. Most of the ones that aren't 5 star are regarding my accent. The only other criticism I've received, which was justified, was I went through a period of almost half-arsing it. So I was established a couple of years in, and I was sort of going through and choosing easier cases, not doing as much research as I could have done, sort of half-arsing it, just getting through, pushing the content out. And someone left me a review basically saying just as much. Sometimes you need to hear something from someone else, even if you think it, for it to sink in. And it was like, there's really good potential for this, but X, Y, and Z needs improving, or a bit more research required here. Don't overlook things so quickly. And I thought, you know what? At first, you hear something like that and you think, fuck you. Fuck you. Do you know how hard I work? But then when you sleep on it and you think, actually, they've got a point because they're saying what you think already. So if it's constructive like that, it's awesome. It's when people just say, this is shit, or couldn't listen because the narrator's accent is rubbish. But when they call me the narrator as well, by the way, that pisses me off.
But what about the actual criticisms of what you do during your podcast? Like when it comes to focusing on, yeah, when it comes to focusing on more about the victims, when it comes to focusing on the serial killers, because from discussions I've had about the true crime obsession, there is a divide between people that really like to see the killer's mindset and put themselves in the killer's shoes, which I think we've discussed at brief points. But then also focusing on the victims of the actual killers, which tend to get glossed over in a lot of documentaries. It seems to be just focused on how the killer acted and did. They necessarily don't go into the fact that someone lost their life, interview the family members to see who this person was. So I'm curious what criticisms you get for that, and then also where you've tried to focus in or what you've noticed about your audience when it came to focusing on what the actual general subject matter would contain, not just the murder.
So the first question there, it's not something I receive frequently, if not at all, because I focus mine mainly on the victim. So my episodes are named now after the victim. When I started, admittedly, they weren't. They were named after the perpetrator. That was what I thought was the best way to do it from a marketing perspective. I've since learned that not to worry about that. If the content's good enough, people will gravitate towards it. So I focus on the victims anyway, but what I do is I offer an objective viewpoint from both sides. So I will focus on the victim first of all, then I'll go through the chain of events, then I'll focus on the perpetrator. And assuming the information's available, I'll talk about their childhood. What was their environment like? Were they raised by parents that were together? Did they separate at a young age? Did anyone die while they were young? Did they have mental health problems growing up? So all that stuff does get included in mine. So it's not something I receive personally. It's not like, oh, you do too much on the victims or you do too much on the perpetrators, because I try and do an equal amount on both. Obviously, remembering the memory of the victim in the best possible light, according to the information I've got, but also looking into the background of the killer. Because if there were childhood problems, I'm researching a case at the moment where it turns out the killer had schizophrenia. And when he was young, he had school reports saying that he was far too obsessed with the occult and Satanism, and he had such dark thoughts that he couldn't get involved in the schoolwork. Why that was, it doesn't say, and it's not providing an excuse for what they did, but it's just interesting to potentially make that link. The second part of your question was regarding what? Sorry, I've forgotten.
Don't
I had an
ask me,
answer
dude. I
for
already
it.
forgot it
I had
too.
I had an answer for it, but I've forgotten. My memory is so bad. So you asked me about the, the feedback. Oh, the audience, my audience. You were talking about my audience. I think it was about my audience. Anyway, catering to my audience. Let's talk about that.
Okay, yeah.
My audience is primarily women, so about 70%, I would say, women. Age range anywhere between 40 and 60. So let's use the term middle-aged women. Sorry. That's my key audience. Because of that, and this came back on some feedback I got recently off someone who emailed me, who called me a man hater, because I don't cover as many men as women, even though more men get killed in every Western country than women, which is true.
Wait,
But what? Go
that
on.
is different when I brought that up to the guy who I said studies the true crime obsession. He said most of the serial killers are men. And I
No, no, no.
go,
I'm on about the victims. Sorry, the
okay,
homicide victims.
uh,
So the homicide, more men are killed than women or children in pretty much all Western countries.
well, I would think it would be the opposite because I feel like more women, since they're like if it's a man serial killer, they'd be killing women because they're easier than it would be to kill a man. It's not to talk about genders here, but just overall strength purposes.
Yeah, no, but you're focusing on serial killers here. I'm just focusing on all homicides
Okay.
because I just cover murders, not just serial killers. Although I have done serial killers. So 71% of homicide victims in the UK for the year ending March 2023 were men, basically. So this person was arguing that I focus too much on women being killed. Now, this person, I won't get into it, but they said some horrible things. I don't think this person likes women. I don't know if they've been hurt by a woman before. Doesn't concern me, but very insecure person. That's an aside. The point is, my audience is mainly women. I do admittedly have a tendency to focus on more women being killed, especially by men, if the men are partners or former partners. Part of that is to raise awareness, though, because domestic abuse is such a touchy subject even now. Like, I found out through doing the podcast that referring to it all as domestic violence is very, very wrong, because not all domestic abuse is violent. It could be emotional abuse, it could be economic abuse, financial abuse, all different kinds. So I've learned that the hard way through feedback from people who've said, just an FYI, because a lot of people that listen have had their own trauma in the past as well. That could potentially be a link as to why people enjoy this content, because it's something they can relate to in a very dark way. So I do sometimes have a tendency to cover women that are being killed, especially by partners or former partners, possibly because my audience has gone through some of that to some degree, possibly because my audience is mainly women, possibly to raise awareness. But all my cases are suggested by my listeners anyway, so I don't go out of my way to pick certain ones within a certain theme.
Yeah, but don't you think that's because in most of Western society, we kind of view murder differently when it comes to like someone who gets into a van and then gets murdered out in the middle of the forest somewhere compared to a guy who tries to rob a liquor store and shoots another guy dead. We don't look at it like it is a murder, but it's not seen in the same light. When we talk about like when people envision the true crime series or true crime genre, they envision somebody with a long convoluted story that ends up kidnapping one person. It doesn't have to be a serial killer, just a murder that happened where someone was kidnapped or taken or hostage or anything that involves more than like this guy went into a store and shot somebody. So more violent actions are men on men. That is true. But nobody thinks of it like, what kind of, first of all, if you're a podcast looking for content that's going to reach an audience, are you going to want to cover a liquor store shooting that happens? There's fucking, take your pick. There's like 3 a week. And that's in my state. Baltimore's rough.
See, that's where I kind of am different to some because I don't pick cases based on how well they will market. That doesn't interest me. What interests me is the stories that have less or zero coverage that anyone listening will likely have never heard of. Some people have come to me and say, I wish you would cover better stories, which is so insulting because that's insinuating that one person's death is more important than another's and they're a better person than them, which is completely wrong. So I didn't appreciate that comment. But I've covered some stories and there might be 6 or 7 pages worth of information there. And you think, is that too short to write an episode? Maybe it is. I don't just want to fill it with me waffling for 20 minutes. But then again, at the same time, you got to think, but maybe that's the reason to do that episode because no one's heard of it. And this person's memory has kind of just disappeared with time. So I will, if I cover an episode, I will look to see who has covered it previously. If someone's covered it within the last couple of months, the odds are I won't do it because many people that listen to mine will listen to other ones that are just as popular. And it's just an overload. There's no point. Do you know what I mean? But I quite like doing the ones that no one's heard of, even if it is just a case of someone randomly walked to the post office one day and happened to get, killed by someone on a bit of a frenzy. I think that's interesting because that person has a story, as does the killer, even though compared to the more grandiose murders, it could to some be interpreted as being less interesting.
How much do you deem worthy of time to spend on a person's background before you get to the actual murder?
I'd, I would say the actual murder
Because you can't
is
talk about their third birthday party where they got a significant toy.
no,
You
no,
have to
no.
get
But
eventually to the crime.
I mean, I'm not a big fan these days of going into too much gruesome detail. So if someone gets stabbed 114 times, I will say that what ended up being their cause of death, any major injuries. But I wouldn't go, oh, and the location of them were here, 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 and here. Do you know what I mean? I'm not interested in the gore. I'm interested in the story and what led to that chain of events from both sides. But for me, the actual murder, depending on how quickly it happened, murder tends to happen pretty quickly, unless it's someone, being tortured over hours or kidnapped and that kind of thing. That's probably a very, very small portion of my content because I'm more into the murder is literally, I will start off with the background of a person, what their family is like, do they have children, where do they work in the community, how are they viewed by their neighbors and their colleagues, when did they start work, where did they go to school. All that is what I cover if it's available because I find that interesting because it builds a picture of this person. Then ultimately you get to the timeline, which could be as simple as he walked to the shop to get some booze and there was a robbery in progress and it happened to get shot. Bit unlikely in the UK with the shooting thing, but that's just an example. Then I would go into, well, how did the killer get to that situation where he was robbing the shop? What was his arrest like? What was his interview process like? What was the trial like? Anything that was presented to the jury? Was the jury the original jury, or was the jury changed? Who was the judge? And then the aftermath. So, has this person appealed their sentence? Are they still in prison? Have they passed away? So, the murder is such a small part of what I do, whereas some other people would focus more on the murder and less on the background. It's just different taste. People do different things.
Have you ever been alluded to new information from a listener that goes on the basis of a victim? Because not all victims have a necessarily hunky-dory background. You can look at the innocent ones that have like, oh, she was just walking down the street and this happened. But then there's some that are like they were in jail for murder themselves. They got out and they got murdered. So like sometimes you post a thing just thinking about the good bits and not trying to look into the dark history about the victim, because then you'll get criticisms on both. If you miss out a detail, they're going to give you shit for it. If you include the detail, then you get crap for picking on someone who's now dead. So it's a healthy balance there, but you have to kind of find like what way you best see it right to give this person their kind of whatever couple minutes of fame or justice.
There was a case I did last week, and it was an old married couple. They'd been together about 3 decades, and towards the end, the marriage became very bitter,
Hmm.
and there was a lot of back and forth
Like one
about,
of them hard candies they got in their pockets.
sure, Werther's original. And they were living in the same house despite going through this acrimonious divorce. On the advice of the solicitor, was to stay in the house so that, because the house was in his name, and if she moved out, it's effectively she'd have no claim on the house, I guess. I don't know the ins and outs of the legal side, but they lived together. She lived upstairs, he lived downstairs. He had locks on the living room and his bedroom, so she couldn't go in it. She never got round to installing a lock on hers. One day he ends up going upstairs and stabbing her to death. He was 74 and she was 70, or might be the other way around. In the arrest video, it just looks like a frail old man, and a lot of the comments were saying as much. This guy's been through hell, sort of having a go at the victim, that she was an abusive woman, a typical woman, all these really misogynistic comments. So when I approach that episode, it's important that I highlight not only those comments, but also the fact that no one knows what the in and outs of a relationship are. So, as much as I do try to paint the victim in the best light possible, because most of the information you have is from grieving family members, right? And they're not going to say, yeah, that was my grandma, but she was a bit horrible. They're not going to say that, are they? All the praise you get is going to come from the family members. But then again, the people that are praising the killer, that needs to be included as well. Like the one I'm covering at the moment, his parents, to him, he was a saint. The neighbors said he was the idea of a perfect son. They loved him. They saw him walking down the street with his girlfriend, smiling all the time, had a happy life. But they didn't know that he was into Satanism, and he collect books about Nazis, and he's getting these school reports about being obsessed with the occult and all this. They don't know that. But I'm not going to omit the fact that people said he was the perfect kid, because that would instill some bias. So I don't want to go around saying every single person that's killed is a saint and untouchable and the best person in the world. It's not realistic, is it? We've all got downsides, we've all got positives as well. So if I can only go on what's available, and I do put a disclaimer in my episode saying, basically, this is based on the research I found. My sources are listed on my website. In some instances, there may be some facts that are incorrect. I'm limited to what I don't go around giving my opinion, basically. I can only report on what I find.
Have you ever found out that you might have ended up speculating something that could be wrong?
Someone commented on a YouTube video the other day, and it was from my second season. So I'm in season 14 right now. My second season was in 2021, about March, so 3 years ago and a bit. And they said, if you don't know enough about someone's first marriage, then you shouldn't be commenting on it. So I just went back and said, I'll be the first to say my research back then was probably not as thorough as it is now. I was still very green, and that was about it. They've not come back to me. So I think it's contextual. Back then, my research was probably terrible compared to what it is now. Sometimes I won't even include parts of the story. One guy came to me and said, "You mentioned me in this story. Do you mind if you just go and edit my name out of the story?" And I went back and I thought, yeah, I had no need to mention this person. It wasn't a part of it was just a neighbor, I think. But they don't want to be associated with this. So then going forward, you're thinking, I guess you can have too much information, like you say. There's information you can give out that you don't need to. I tend to not name the children of people, especially the perpetrator, because they're probably moved on, trying to get on with their life. They don't want the burden of what they've already got of their father or mother is a killer to then be mentioned in a true crime podcast again. It's needless when you can just say the killer had two children aged 10 and 8. You don't have to say their names were Lucy and Martin. It doesn't really add anything to the story, you know?
But even with information that you're getting on either old newspapers or article sources or anything you could find online, when you don't have the information, when you go to search up something about somebody and you have no information there, what do you do then? Do you try and fill in the gap with something to get to the next part so you don't try and, because then how do you skip from this person's born and then let's say you don't have anything about the middle of their life, then you just go straight into the murder. Then it's kind of like, well, we're missing the whole 20-year period or 30-year period where they were active. What were they doing in that time? Then you have to fill it with something.
It depends. You've got two options. You can fill it with bullshit. You can just fill it with words that don't mean anything. You can speculate on what someone's life. If you know they went to school here and they got 10 A levels, and then the next information you know is they got murdered. You can go on, oh well, they studied this at school, so maybe they went on to do a career in this and this and that. I don't do that personally. I just say there's cases where there's nothing available. And I will say, unfortunately, based on my research, there's no information available regarding this person's background. What else can I say? I'm not going to make it up. I don't know it. Hopefully, there's enough information to create a story. It's not a good start, admittedly, if there's nothing there. But sometimes this person sounds awful, but this person was just normal, ordinary, not uninspiring, but they didn't do anything that was newspaper worthy, you know? And sometimes if someone gets killed and they don't have extended family, they might not have kids, they might be a widow. The family might not want to speak to the reporters. They can't ask them about that person's background because they won't speak to them. There's loads of variables that can come up. It's not a
How
good start, like I say, but sometimes you're better to just say, look, I couldn't find anything.
How important is being able to show sources for the content that you put out there? Like if you're trying to look for a newspaper where someone got murdered, you know they got murdered. It's not a story, it's not made up, it's not fantasy. You know they got murdered, but you cannot find the newspaper clipping, or you can't find any photo of them to do that. It's part with my clips. I've been putting AI generated images to how I would think that they would look. It's not saying this is them entirely. Everyone can tell. It's just that, like I do it in a courtroom sketch style. So it's like you know that this person is not a real depiction of the person, but we just don't, I can't find any available footage. I've gone to obituaries, I've gone to a bunch of things. I have some guesses as this might be their obituary, but it says nothing in relating to what I need for the clip. So it's like I'm not going to put someone's, grandpa on a clip and they're like, what the fuck? I didn't know grandpa was part of the JFK assassin. There's no need for that. So I'm wondering when you don't have resources available to back up some of the documentation that you know for a fact is true, what do you do in those scenarios? Because I know you're very probably research based, very fact based when it comes to this is this and this is this. So you'll go to, town papers and stuff like that, and you'll go to something to try and find something, but not everything is available online despite our beliefs.
No, it's not. The honest answer is I won't cover that story, basically. So people suggest cases to me. I add them to a spreadsheet. When it comes around to covering a story or researching it, like this morning, turn on my laptop, choose a case, start doing some research. If there's nothing there online or in a newspaper archive or in anything I can find, I'm sorry, but I can't. There's not enough there for me to release an episode on it, which is awful because that is in itself negating someone's passing and someone's life. But if there's nothing there, there's nothing I can do. I can't, even if there's 5 articles, some articles literally say if it is a straightforward murder, that's poor choice of wording, but I can't think of anything else. Guy walks into a car park, randomly gets shot by someone having a bit of an episode. He gets arrested straight away and goes to prison. It's not much of a story, is it? And if there's only 3 articles about that and nothing's been uploaded to a newspaper archive, I can't come up with a 20, 25-minute story about that without 90% of it being made up or being subjective, which I just do objective whenever I can. So I'll just go back to someone and say, I see you've requested this episode. Unfortunately, I can't cover it. Yours is slightly different because a lot of the stuff you do is maybe, I say well known, but like JFK assassination, people know that happened, right? The stuff you do is stuff that people won't be aware of. So you're actively trying to go out and find things relating to something you know happened. So there are similarities, but mine's different. I start with a blank canvas. Can you cover this murder case? I'll try and find stuff on it. And if there's not enough, I'm going to have to reject it.
Well, see, then you get into the problem of there's too much information, and that's why we have 50 million different theories and ideas and speculations and stories that get created. And I can't, like, I just found out a very simple thing. There's a allegation that arose when the assassination happened of Lee Harvey Oswald being in the Carousel Club that Jack Ruby owned a week before the assassination took place. If you know Lee Harvey's background, you know that he was silent. He was, didn't really talk to many people, and he was very kind of a loner type. But he really loved his wife, and like they might have had a complicated relationship. But he was a good father. He wouldn't have hung out at a carousel club. Everyone agrees on that. The Warren Commission agrees on that. They even called the allegation a lie and all this type of stuff. Found out where that stemmed from was a ventriloquist guy who worked at the club at the Carousel Club said he might have saw Lee Harvey Oswald in the crowd. And then also the master of ceremonies happened to say that Lee Harvey Oswald was in there a week before. It's a lie. It got created. And then now it's become a part of some of these theories. So now it's about debunking those. So conspiracy and true crime are different. What I do is a little bit different. But when it comes to true crime, and we're talking about kind of your focus here, when we look and examine things that are obviously fact-based and how many people want a story, I mean, a lot of people really just want you to create some content that's more entertaining than it is actually factual. Some people appreciate the factionality of it, but then you become in a complicated scenario where you're like, I don't want to be another fucking Netflix series that is just giving you 40 minutes of fluff that is kind of made up and part speculation. Very fact-based stuff. A lot of people just, I mean, I don't know what the true crime obsession is, why it's there. But a lot of people like the detective aspects. They like it to be like, and then there was this, and then there was this. And they're like, oh my God, yeah, keep me on my toes. But really, it's just that I want to give you this is the murder, this is how it happened, this is the victim. You play it a little bit differently, which is more ethical, in my opinion. I appreciate that more. But a lot of people don't do that because they know they can get more clicks with trying to hammer down this kind of cultural obsession with not just true crime, but wanting to be a detective.
Yeah. I mean, this is why my episodes are 20, 25, 30 minutes, which is considered short in the
Fucking cheap
podcast.
in my version. I'm doing 1 hour to
Yeah.
2 hours. Step up to
Well,
the plate.
more fool you.
I know.
But
Those
like,
1 minute
so,
clips have been trending more than any episodes. I'm
yeah,
like, all right, I know what I'm doing.
says
Getting drunk
everything.
and making
Says
clips.
everything, doesn't it? But yeah, some people just want an overview, high level stuff. And I always say, if you want to find out more, you're welcome to go and research it. Some people have come and said, "Oh, this is average." It tells you in 30 minutes what you could find out in 5, and it's like, I get where you're coming from because anyone could do this. You could. All I'm doing is open source things, amalgamating it, writing a script, and reading it out. But yeah, I don't like the longer stuff where it's almost like a film, isn't it? You see an episode that's an hour and a half, you think, God, I got to settle in for this. I can't walk my dog for an hour and a half. And it's like, dun dun dun. Imagine a cold day in Arkansas. You're walking around the corner. You're going on your normal walk to work, and then what comes out of the corner? Douche! A
Why do
man
you
with a
sound
gun.
American when you do that?
I said Arkansas, didn't
I
I?
don't think that's what people from Arkansas sound like, but it did sound like a good American.
Well, they probably do to us.
I'd
But do you
vote
know what I
for
mean?
you.
Thank you. I mean, I'm not going to get into that, but yeah,
Mhm.
yeah, some people prefer the long, story-based, dramatic, fiction, fictionalized reality, fictionalized non-fiction is. I don't know if that's the exact term, but do you know what I mean? You're playing with non-fiction by throwing in elements of fiction. Where them TV shows where they say some elements of this have been put together for entertainment purposes, like reality shows that they wouldn't really be talking in a bar to each other having an argument, but the studio have put them together so that they can have that argument. You know, the fact that they don't like each other is true, but the fact they're having that argument right there is because the studio told them to do that. Might be a bad example, but makes sense in my head. And some people just prefer the quick, true aspect of it.
Do you think people would, do you think that the facts would trend more than the more entertainment value that our culture has consumed?
No, no, not at all. And this is why we were talking briefly before we started about YouTube and why my podcast doesn't translate to YouTube in its current format. So I had my YouTube channel audited by this guy who is a is not is, I think is he from Ukraine or something? Pretty popular, right? Like at least 1 million subs. So he knows what he's talking about, a young kid. And he audited my channel and he basically said that the way your podcast is formatted. So I start with, hello everyone, welcome to season X of.
Time out. Did he audit you like in one of his videos, or did he audit
No,
you
no, no, no,
personally?
no. So I went on Fiverr and I paid this guy to audit my YouTube channel.
Oh, you paid for this to happen. You
Yeah,
paid
yeah,
for
yeah.
a guy to insult you.
Give me constructive criticism, yes.
Jesus.
It was really worth it, to be fair.
I can't handle that shit. I'm still thinking about you telling me my thumbnails look like trash. I had to redo them all. You know how fucking painful that was? But every single one I kept saving and uploading that looked better, I kept going, God damn you, Stuart.
Are they performing better now? You just said you've
They
jumped from
do look more
2,000 to
professional.
5,000.
That's because
Do you know
of
what I'm
one
saying?
clip.
All
One
right
clip
then.
is trending. I don't know
Yeah.
why it's trending, but it is.
Well, when people subscribe to you, they will now see your videos with the better thumbnails. You are
Just don't
welcome.
go back before 1,100 because I'm too lazy to go back to the rest. I said I've done 500 something so far. This is painful.
Yeah, I think you can leave the rest, to be fair.
Everyone
But
only
anyway,
looks at 30 videos anyway, and then I get called a racist for talking to too many white people. Sorry. Can't find too many people that aren't in their 70s that research JFK. God damn.
yeah. But yeah, so my format starts with welcome to episode whatever. I do some icebreakers at the start, and then I go into the story. Doesn't work for YouTube because the odds of someone seeing your video that is familiar with your content is so slim. I have about 4,500 subs on there, and they get a notification when I publish a new video. But most of them probably have the notifications off, so they won't see it, or they'll get the notification and think, so, not watching that. So most of this, if you go on YouTube, right, the channel you watch the most videos of will have recommended videos. Underneath that, there'll be no one that you subscribe to. So you have to treat every single YouTube video as if it's the first time anyone will ever see your content. So doing stuff as part of a series, unless you're well established, is pointless. So me saying welcome to episode 3 of season 14, people are going to go, season 14 of what? I don't listen to this shit. What the hell's this? So I have to start and be false by saying, hello everyone, welcome to YouTube. I'm your host, Stuart Blues, and this week we are talking about so and so. You know, like all these videos you see on TikTok of this intro that people have, you have to hook people in. It's just not my style, man. And to know I spend so many hours working on a script that I would then have to modify, learn the script unless I had a teleprompter because you have to look into the camera when you're speaking, be energetic. You have to edit the video so there's no pauses between sentences because people's attentions are so shit. It's just so, you're talking 3 days work, and the video will get 200 views or something within the first month. Whereas on the podcast, I'll get 15,000 in a week. So why spend 3 days doing something I can spend one day on that gets, Christ knows what the percentage more in traction is, because that's my audience. That audience doesn't watch YouTube videos like that. They might go on TikTok and watch shorts and reels and all that, but in order to do that, you have to have video content, really, unless I just do a picture with text. But even that, what's the payoff? That nothing. Doesn't earn money.
Well, what's the most difficult platform for you? Is YouTube? Because like, how do you base on the content of like what's graphic content when you're posting things about you post up about a murder, eventually you're going to have to show some type of photo or you're going to have to show something. Like I want to talk about Kennedy's autopsy, but I can't do anything without showing autopsy photos. And I just know, I don't even know how YouTube is going to feel about that. I don't know if it's going to make sense. Like, for instance, there's a shit ton of doctors that saw Kennedy that said he had a giant hole in the back of his head. And then there's a cop, his name's James Chaney. I got his testimony. He literally states that when we got to Parkland Hospital, he was on the right side of Kennedy, in one of the four motorcycles, so riding right kind of beside Kennedy. He literally states, I saw Kennedy's head, explode, and his eye was all bulged out. Well, I have the autopsy photo. His fucking head's intact. His eyes aren't bulged out. He looks like he might have died of a heart attack because his face is so clean. The only thing is like the back of his head's like top of his scalp part's like kind of gone. But I'm like, this matches nothing of what the cop's testimony is. So either he's lying like the other 20 people that saw him, or somebody did something to the autopsy. But I can't show that on YouTube. So when you're doing a murder, how do you not show up a newspaper or show up an autopsy or show up a body or show up if you have footage? I mean, in my opinion, if you come across footage from a security camera of somebody getting stabbed, or if you come across footage of somebody that decided to record as a body is being taken away and put into an ambulance, I would consider that usable. YouTube does not. YouTube will say that this is sensitive content and they will flag it for harmful acts or violence or conspiracy talk. They don't care.
I would agree with YouTube on this one. I mean, we don't have, we call them post-mortems, but we don't have autopsy photographs made available or even leaked, really, to the public. Because it's so sensitive. And the odds of having, the police must be really good at securing CCTV footage. Because unless you've filmed a murder on your phone and published it online, yeah, some people might see it, but it'll soon, as far as I'm aware, get taken down, I guess.
Yeah, but if you have a newspaper article that talks about the murder and that's the only thing you can use as evidence, and the photo that they decided to use was the person in a body bag, do you not use it?
No.
Why? That's so dumb.
I just don't think it adds anything to it.
But then how do you go, this murder happened without going to like an article about it? You have to go to the actual newspaper where the headline said person murdered.
Well, no, it's just me talking in front of a screen. I use my words.
Don't you think that you would show the evidence of like, this is the newspaper
No.
when they died?
Well, this is probably why it doesn't translate well. Because it's just me.
If I was watching you and you were going to mention a murder and you just came on screen and said,
I'd show the
murder
killer.
happened at this.
I
Yeah,
mean,
but then
I wouldn't say that.
where's
That's
the
point.
newspaper? I want to know that it actually happened and someone reported on it.
Well, check my references. Go read it.
I want to see it on the
Yeah, but what
screen.
is showing you a screenshot of a newspaper article, a grainy black and white newspaper article from 1989? What's that going to add?
It adds more weight to the fact that it's a real murder and it was reported on when it happened.
I don't think people think like that in general.
Yeah, but don't you feel like that some of the audience tunes out after a minute or two, especially if it's just
They
you on
probably
screen
do.
talking?
Yeah, they probably do. And this is why it probably doesn't translate to YouTube very well. This is why sticking to audio makes sense on so many levels. There are some true crime podcasters that are ultra successful on there. I don't understand why. I don't get it. Because what if you watch their videos, apart from showing like a house with crime scene tape, or the picture of someone when they were young, or the picture of the killer, or the killer being arrested, or a court sketch. That's about the limit of what you can show.
Yeah, but to me, I don't know. I feel like more people are interested in the actual like voiceover with the actual images rather than hearing someone talk about it. They actually just want to hear the
Yeah,
story.
you probably are, but the problem with that is if my story's 30 minutes long, there's not enough pictures.
You can make them last.
So if there's 6 pictures,
Well, you should have way more than 6 pictures if you're doing a 30-minute clip on it.
well, no, not necessarily, because
Yeah.
again, the research is words though. If I
You can
cover a story
you
about
can
someone, like I covered a
show
story,
like how documentaries do where they're going over the words as the voiceover is saying it and just highlighting the things that are on the paper. That's why I said it's good to have newspapers because then you can just zoom into the text of the newspaper and say in 1939 this person was murdered during a street thing, and then you just go through the newspaper, and that's like good 5 minutes right there. You can make that last.
hmm, sounds like a lot of work for
But
little reward.
documentaries do.
Documentaries have a fucking team of people
I know.
getting paid.
I know. It's just me and you doing our own shows singly,
Yeah,
so
exactly. So this is why you got to pick your battles, man. You've got to pick your battles.
I don't agree
Yeah,
with you on not showing a magazine or newspaper. I would show the shit out
I
of it.
just, yeah, but I just,
Signed. Signed.
I mean, it's never occurred to me, but I don't see the point of me just screenshotting a paper, the front cover, if because it's just a little article sometimes in the corner. That's not going to achieve anything. If it's a big front page spread that has, killer arrested and it's a picture of him, I get that. But some of the articles, it's just a side
Yeah.
article piece.
That happens with
What?
the JFK stuff too.
Yeah, but including it's just a load of text on a screen. People aren't going to go, hang on, let me pause the video and just read that text, squinting.
Well, a lot of people want to know, like, especially if you're talking about more fact-based approaches, a lot of people just want to see another cooperating source. In the United States, we've only had one story that has ever been non-corroborated by a second source, and that was during the whole Watergate scandal with Carl and Bernstein. So they only had one source for the information, which was Mark Felt, Deep Throat, which gave all this information about the stuff that got leaked, like the Pentagon Papers and all that, that kind of changed our whole government and led to Watergate and all that. But that was only by one source. People need a secondary source, so when they hear you talking about it, they don't know you that. Some of them new listeners don't know you, so they just want to know that you're coming with a fact-based. Here's the article. It just backs up what exactly I'm telling you, so you don't have to take me at face value.
Yeah, I get that. But again, bringing it back to my disclaimer at the start of every single episode, I state in there a full list of and I put it in the description as well. A full list of resources used for this episode is available on my website.
Okay.
It's just a difference of opinion. Maybe it's a cultural thing.
Well,
Most of my audience is UK based. That's never anything that's ever come to my mind really as something to do.
Or do you ever come across fans that are in denial or kind of chalk up your work into the conspiracy thing because you might mention something about an act that a lot of people would just be hard to believe? Everyone's got a stopping point. Not everyone can get with you on certain levels. If you said a person had taken this pill and put it into their husband or wife's whatever thing and slowly started killing them over time, that's an insane story. But a lot of people are like, that doesn't sound real. And then at that point, it's like, you're entering the conspiracy realm. And it's like, well, how else do you try and tell people, though, this is what happened? But
Well, it's if you believe it or not, that's up to you, isn't it? You can read the same sources I read. The biggest one I had about that was this guy that he smoked some weed, and he apparently had some I can't think what some kind of
like
hallucinogenic.
it's called psychosis.
Yeah, he had some kind of hallucinogenic reaction, right? So obviously his weed was either laced with something,
Mm.
whatever. He didn't smoke
Or
it
he
often. I
ha
don't know.
he had a mental disorder. We talked about this last time. I've done plenty of
Yeah,
episodes on.
yeah, it could be, and we might have touched on this case before. But with that one, I had so much pushback from regular everyday weed smokers because they are very sensitive about defending their habit, and it is a habit. I don't care if you're listening and you're smoking weed. I have no problem with it, but it is a habit and it is an addiction. Don't let people tell you it isn't because it is. and it changes who you are and it changes your mindset and your head. I know that. People can disagree. You might disagree. This is my experience of it.
No,
It's
I
not
agree.
based on doctors' facts or anything. It's just people are so quick to defend weed for some reason. It's weird.
It's had a horrible
But
back history.
yeah, maybe. I don't know enough about it. All I know is from the experiences I've had with people that have done it, I know what it can do to people's heads. And it's like people are so quick to defend it. So when this episode came out, they were like, weed doesn't do that to you. This would never happen. This is bullshit. There must have been something else. It must have been laced with, it must have done this. And I just like, when you don't expect, like your one that's gone viral recently, you probably didn't expect it to do as well as it did. I didn't expect the backlash of this than what I got. I was like, fucking hell. That's such a minor part of the story, really. Do you know what I mean? He killed someone. You're taking issue with the fact that he smoked some weed. That's what you took from this story. Come on. Some people just they will pick the smallest irrelevant part of a story that might be wrong. Maybe I'll say someone's 27 when they're actually 30. Grand scheme of things, does it affect the story? No. But some facts will be wrong. As
Well,
long as it's not something major.
what happens if you have a story about contributing factors to somebody's leading to a murder, like the marijuana, but if it was more alcohol related? You mentioned that they had just come back from a bar and they had a bit of an alcohol abuse problem and they were going to classes for it. Then you have a scenario where now you're kind of leaning more towards not maybe intentionally trying to, but you've already kind of put that thought into people's heads that this person might just have this might be an effect of the alcohol. You could do that with anything. Somebody smoked a cigarette and smoked a pack a day and just whatever. You can blame their job. You end up blaming something in your episode. Have you noticed that you've done that? Not intentionally, but it just kind of comes out that way. Which you kind of look at it, you go, it's not necessarily what I meant, but I can see why someone would be upset over you picking that, like the marijuana thing.
Sometimes it's interesting that the resources you use, people will suspect motives. So in that example, I might say, Mr. Smith was battling his addiction to alcohol. He was going to AA meetings. He relapsed on this night. Some people think that that relapse was brought on by such and such event, and that is the main reason as to why so and so ended up being killed. I might say something like that. I wouldn't necessarily say, oh, but this could have been, the motive might have been this. Any motive I suggest is generally from someone else's opinion. So the police believe the motive to be X. The family of the victim firmly believe that they were killed because of this reason.
But logically, your audience is going to make that conclusion when you talk about a killer. And you mentioned the fact that they were abused as a child. It only makes logical sense that you would come to the conclusion that this neglect in childhood led to their actions as an adult.
I tend to ask my audience that. So I get what you're saying. If in that situation, I might say, based on this person's childhood, how would I word it? It's interesting. So the amount of times I've had to say, I'm not trying to justify what they did here. However, they were, in that example, abused as a child. They had a torrid upbringing. So I will say that sometimes. And I will often ask my audience, I'll say, let me know what you think. Do you think his childhood was, led to this? Could it have been prevented with social intervention? So child services, if they'd have been brought in earlier, would this have prevented it? Let me know. Because I want to create engagement, but I want my audience to do a lot of the thinking on the subjective aspect rather than myself. There will be instances where I have inadvertently said something and maybe it comes across as my opinion. But I'm always careful when I'm writing my script to try and negate that if it ever does read that way. Does that make sense? Just with a
Yeah.
little caveat saying, I'm not trying to justify this, but we need to remember that this happened to this person as well.
Okay. I would say what would be the most conflicting thing for you when you're talking about a serial killer, if you're focusing into more of one that would tend to lean more towards the killer's perspective rather than focusing on the victim. Obviously, there's a lot of interesting cases you probably come across where maybe you learn something about the victim, but also there might be a serial killer or someone that is in kind of done a couple grisly murders where you're like, damn, this guy's background, I really want to spend most of the episode focusing into that because it's just more interesting. I mean, do you blame the people that would want to learn more about the killer than they would about the victim? I think everyone kind of wants to know why they have this obsession with it.
I don't blame them because if a serial murderer goes and kills 10 people, the odds are those 10 people,
Just 10?
well, it's
50?
just all right, between 10 and 50, Jesus.
No, not
But
between, just 50.
just 50, okay.
That's a
So kill,
serial killer.
well, there's more than three I heard,
That's a
but
fucking psychopath. That ain't a serial killer.
okay. 50 then. The odds are those 50 people are going to be your run of the mill, standard, everyday person off the street. Probably not too dissimilar to the listener. They'll have flaws, they'll have positive attributes, they'll probably have a family of some degree, maybe they have children, a lot of relatable information. To a lot of people listening, that's sounds bad, but that's quite mundane because it's nothing new. A lot of the people that like true crime want to hear about the people that commit the crimes because that's so out of the realm of ordinary life. They want to know what makes that person tick. It's like celebrities. They're on a whole different level of hierarchy as people on this world. What do they eat for dinner? What do they watch on TV? Oh, you wouldn't ask the person on the, oh, what did you watch last night? It's really interesting. Well, the same as you. Oh. But like, oh my God, Kim Kardashian watches The X Factor like I do. Oh my God, that's amazing. Because they're a celebrity, they're famous. And sadly, the killers, although you would use the word infamous rather than famous, they've done something so abhorrent that is so out of the realm of normal life. You think, fucking hell, what makes this person tick? What do they do when they get up in the morning that could lead you to do this? Do they eat breakfast like I do? What do they eat? Do they go to work? Do they have a job? Do they have? It's more interesting for most people to find out about someone who's done something terrible than just a normal person, because that probably won't be too dissimilar to you.
Do you find it to be a healthy thing when people listen to true crime? Do you think it creates violence? Do you think it has any of these factors that lead to kind of warning signs?
I don't think so.
Okay.
There are instances of killers who, and they were into horror movies and they were obsessed with Satanism. I don't think that's a reason that people would kill people. Like, I would never play Grand Theft Auto and think, do you know what? I'm going to get a machine gun and go and kill 100 people and pretend I'm on a rampage. Because people who are mentally stable don't think like that. But people that don't like violent video games and violent films, there was a period in the 80s, wasn't it, with these video nasties, like The Evil Dead and all these films. It might have been a UK thing, but they all got banned in the UK. And they were called video nasties. And they weren't allowed to be released just because they were so gory. But the media and the government tried to ban all these things because of the detrimental effect it will have on people. But I believe that it won't have an effect on someone who doesn't have any mental
Yeah.
issues.
I think the only research study from what I've heard from the guy mentioned about the true crime obsession that it can speed up things that are already there, but it's just like the video game and violent subject. There's no evidence to support that it causes people to become violent. But it's actually been shown in studies to be actually pretty helpful and kind of healthy to listen to stuff like this. Surprisingly, the gruesome content, it just depends on how far you go with it. Obviously, there's
Do you not think
sensitive.
it's like boxing, for example, though? Sorry to cut you off, but when you go for a work, if you're really pissed off, right?
I am right
The
now because
what?
you cut me off.
I know, I bet you are. The
Uh,
worst thing you could do would be to hold that in, right? Versus you go to a boxing gym and you beat the shit out of a punching bag. Or you go on a run if that's your outlet, or you do whatever. You're letting that anger those dark thoughts that we all have from time to time, no matter who wants to think you don't, you have it. You need an outlet for that. And a lot of the people that I come across are so reserved and will just be almost pushovers, and they just store everything. They push it down and push it down and push it down until one day that shit just comes out in a whole heap of violence that ends up with people getting killed. You need an outlet. Sorry, continue. You can't remember what you were going to say, could you?
Nope,
Shit.
it's
You're
fine.
not going to let me, you'll never let me live that down as well. God
Nope.
damn.
Um, no, the healthy aspect to it. I mean, there's actually been evidence and studies to show that it's actually beneficial when people listen to this type of content. But when we talk about sensitive events and things that are too sensitive, you mentioned, I think probably on your like fourth time or maybe fifth time on, you've mentioned about a guy who killed a baby. I think it was on like some railroad tracks, if I'm not mistaken. You mentioned that like who the hell would kill a baby? Like an infant, a life that couldn't protect itself, just anything like that. You got to be like a sick individual. And everyone would think that, but it's a sensitive event because a lot of people, like those episodes that you would focus on that would involve the death of a young child or a boy or a girl or whoever. Do you find that you would think those would trend more because people's caring aspect of kids, but then you just find out it doesn't get any more views or it gets less than the original stuff because people just don't want to hear about it? A lot of people would immediately turn the TV off or whatever they're listening to when they hear about a death of a child or an animal, more often than people, surprisingly.
Yeah. Dude, I always put a warning. When it's a child murder that I cover, I always start my episode by saying this episode features the murder of a child. If it's likely to be triggering or you don't want to listen, don't listen to this episode. A lot of people choose not to listen to those episodes. So if you were coming at it from a marketing viewpoint, it would be unwise to cover more episodes featuring children. I've not covered an episode, not for not for marketing. I've set myself up there. Not for marketing purposes. I could give a fuck about that. But I haven't covered the murder of a child since the end of I think my 12th season. This kid called Jamie Levis got murdered, and it was so fucking brutal. And I think after 12 seasons of covering murders, many of which were children, it really, really affected me for a good few weeks. Like, I was on the point of thinking about stopping because it was so, I don't know, similar to the outlet thing. Maybe I didn't have an outlet and I was reserving all this numbness that you read about. To me, I've got the danger of reading about all these murders and it's just words on a page. And I think that day, after researching that case, it all came to the surface and the realization of the shit that I do with this kid. I was like, fuck. And it just put me on such a downer for a couple of weeks. So since then, I've not done a case on a kid. But yeah, they certainly, I wouldn't recommend that if you're looking to trend or anything, because that's the opposite will happen.
Do you find that from a marketing point, based on the way you do your episodes, do you find that you're just doing them based on your own personal interest in the case, and you really couldn't care less if it's fascinating to other people? Just you just have like this random thing you'll come across, like I want to do an episode on this. Then you get hooked into it until the episode comes out, and you don't really care if people hear about that. Or are you just strictly going off what your audience wants?
So I do have a massive, it's purely audience selection, but I've got like 400 so far on my, so I've got a big list to choose from. But yeah, I don't give a shit. This is why when the guy reviewed me and said, I wish you would cover better cases, I was like, what do you mean a better case? One that you've heard of? Is that what I should do? And that just completely negates the death of someone else that they haven't heard of because you're so fucking important that I need to cater to you and who you've heard of for it to be a good story. Fuck that. It's my show. I do it in a style that I prefer, in the length and style that I prefer. And I've got to the point now where I'm far less sensitive, and I'll say, if you don't like it, mate, there's a fucking thousand other podcasts out there you can listen to. You don't have to. No one's got you at gunpoint. You don't have to listen to mine. And the guy that left me an email saying I'm a man hater, I only cover cases about women being killed and more men get killed that we talked about earlier. I went back to them and I just said, I'm going to keep doing it how I keep doing it. They called me stuff like, are you weak? They called me impotent, all these stupid names. And I'm like, that's got nothing to do with what we're talking about. So I just went back and said, look, if you want a podcast that focuses more on men being killed, I'm sure there's plenty out there. Just maybe my show's not for you. And then I ended by saying, maybe start your own podcast. I've not heard back since, funnily enough. Because as soon as you tell people, well, what does your podcast cover then? Is yours slightly... Because they don't. They're just keyboard warriors, obviously. Anyone that has a podcast or a YouTube page, they would more likely reach out and give some open and constructive feedback and say, I see you do this and you do it well. Have you considered doing this for this reason? That's constructive. That's positive. But insulting someone's character and personality when they didn't even have the audacity to leave a name, which is cowardly. So I don't know who this person was. The email was just some fake email, no name left or anything. You need to grow up. If you want to listen to something else, if you don't want to listen to Robbie talk about the JFK thing, watch a different video then. No one's forcing you.
I'll say I got like 1,600 other topics I've talked about. For God's sakes, I just like this one.
Exactly. There's a guy on Instagram, and what's his name?
You care way too much about viewer feedback than I do. I fucking hold all my comments for review. And if I see someone comment the same, like if I make a clip about the JFK thing and they comment like everyone knows LHO didn't do it, and I'm just like, delete. And you go, what? Why? Why? Could it's all the same shit. If you can't take 5 minutes to look
you're
at
killing yourself.
I
You're
don't
killing
give
yourself
a
with
shit.
it.
I don't care.
Oh,
There's too
man.
many people that'll comment something stupid. Usually I'll go like I might comment something back and then like the clip on the date on the clip is wrong. And I was like, well, they're auto-generated subtitles. I'm not going to go back and there's no way to go back on YouTube to edit that. It would either be deleted and lose the 300,000 views it got and then restart it again and it probably will not get the same amount of attention. There's no point going back to it, but understanding, I think a lot of people are going to understand, yes, 53 compared to 63 makes sense. And I go, but what about the clip is wrong? If you said the clip is wrong, what else about it? And there's like, the date's wrong. I was like, you're saying that this is like I've had people comment like, stupid conspiracy theories is the junk on the internet. I'm like, this is literally a witness identification project. This is my own idea of doing it with another researcher who made a map of where everyone was in Dealey Plaza and just talking about this. I got pissed off. I couldn't find any of these names, so I decided to do it myself. I go, this is their document testimony. There is nothing, I'm reading it word for word here. There is nothing else in there, but they go wrong, conspiracy, garbage, nonsense. And I'm like, you're not
They're
even
trolling
like,
you,
listen,
and you're
I
letting
know,
them.
but that's
You're
like,
letting them.
God, no, I don't, because I
They're
hold all
throwing
that
the
shit. I
fishing
hold
rod
all
out,
that shit for review.
and you are
And I said,
biting.
delete that comment. I delete it.
You
I
are
delete it, and then
biting.
they have another one right beside it that says block, and I just block them from ever commenting, so then I never have to worry about it again.
Oh, man.
I don't want to hear anybody's take on anything. I really don't. And people
Why
can
don't you
say the same thing about me.
just suspend all comments then?
No. You can keep comments on. Like if someone I like to do that when someone like gives like great clip or something like that, like a
So what
compliment.
you like to do, you like to control the narrative by just leaving the positive shit on there.
I do have
Anything
I have a
that goes
mix.
against what you say, you throw a hissy fit and
No,
delete.
that's no, I it's real if someone says something like there was no conspiracy, then I'll let that go up there. If someone says that there was a conspiracy, I kind of go, no shit, but okay. Um, the only issue is that when they attack the person that I'm doing the clip about, or if they go into the document that I showed, where I was like, well, hang on, this is a government document. And then they say something. And again, it's on both sides. It's not just the people that want to debunk the conspiracies, because I'm in that boat too. I really try and be fact-based. Like everything I show you has a document to it. That's what I'm citing off of. I'm not going off of speculation. I edit that shit out. But when I know there's a claim in a document that is not true, I will not mention that in it. And then someone will comment that wild conspiracy that Jack Ruby was a homosexual. Well, look, there's very little evidence, not enough to where I would make the whole 1 minute clip about even mentioning it. But someone will mention a whole long list of connections with that. And I go, no, I'm not putting that up there. You're stupid. And then there's another one where that'll be like talking about like, and this person believed this and this and this. I'm like, no, that's not what this is about. This person said this at this time. I'm trying to keep history alive here. I don't even consider that being bias or just my point of view. I'm just saying there's not a point in you uh defining me from a clip that doesn't even have my personal belief in it. I don't care
Hmm.
if you believe
Well, this
conspiracy or
is what
not.
I'm talking about. How YouTube has it's the first time people will see it, and possibly the last. You know, they're not going to go through your 1,600 other videos and go, "Oh yeah, it's actually yeah." Based on Robbie's personality, yeah, this makes sense. You know, I did. I don't know, block or hide from channel. This one person kept commenting on this video, saying, "Oh, talk about the family of this killer and saying it was wrong and all this." And I'm saying, look, references are listed on my website. They'd comment again, it's wrong, you know, take this down and all that. I'll just say, look, you're free to do a video on this case. If I'm wrong, make your own fucking video then. No.
A lot of these people that want to comment something like that don't have anything else that they're doing out there. So I'm like, if you feel like you can do a better job at making a clip, be more than happy to do your own, and you don't
Yeah.
hear back.
But the people that are doing clips wouldn't leave such an asinine comment. You know what I mean? So you
Well,
know these people, no
there's not.
videos on their thing, no subscribers, just an idiot with no profile picture or name.
I mean, you're looking at more of a legacy thing here when you really have to examine not putting yourself on a higher pedestal as a podcaster or someone who's covering a subject, but a lot of these murders get slipped through the cracks. Not every single person is watching every single murder out there, or there's not a whole lot of reporting on murders. They're only the interesting ones. So when you're doing a report on one and someone happens to be connected to the sensitive event, they might feel offended. But also, what other content out there is available for this person? There is some of these names in the assassination, they're not important, but there's someone to me that's important because they were there. You know, Becky Jones's testimony is only 2 paragraphs, and there's nothing you can even, I think it was like a 40-second clip. But what comes interesting later is when you find out that when you're looking through her testimony and you finally finish your clip, and then you just go, let me just check online one more time. You go online, there's a video interview with her that's 4 hours long. And I hit that interview, and what she said in that shit, I was like, thank God I didn't post the goddamn clip. I was sitting there like, hold on a second. Did she say that? And she mentioned something, and again, the homosexual thing with the Jack Ruby. When Jack Ruby was sick and dying in jail, Sheriff Bill Decker was massaging his head and calling Jack Ruby's family and friends to come help him calm him down because he was going through some horrible hallucinations and but that I've never heard of that before. And I was like, well, thank God someone bothered to interview this person. But there's no other, you won't find any blogs about it. You won't find any books about it. You won't find any source available or document that will cite that. You only get her in an interview. It is hearsay, and people should take it as that. But it's weird. And nobody could tell that from just looking at her testimony.
Hmm. Here's the question I was going to pose to you,
I don't know.
and
Why
I've
don't I turn
managed to
this into
remember it.
me? I want to ask you questions.
I know, but I like asking you questions.
Fine.
We talked about this video that's doing well on Twitter, X.
Not on
Yeah,
Twitter, it's on YouTube.
you said you were trending on Twitter when we
I said I
first
was
spoke.
trending on YouTube. It's at almost
You
300,000
didn't.
views. You mentioned Twitter on my followers, and I was like, I don't give a fuck about that. My subscribers have gone up.
Right. I'm not getting lost in semantics here. I know what you said, but that's irrelevant because it was off air.
Bullshit.
So there's
Bullshit.
no way to prove it. There's no way to prove it.
Lies.
Anyway, this video that's doing well on whatever fucking platform pops into your head next. Do you ever find yourself
Substack.
catering to what?
I said Substack.
What's that?
You said whatever platform is trending next. I said Substack. It's a shit blog site people use.
Ah, okay. I don't know. Anyway. Fucking hell, you're gonna make me lose it. Right. Do you find yourself when a video does well leaning towards publishing more on that topic, i.e., making content for your audience, or do you just continue to do your own thing? Because there's two paths you can take, right? If I do on TikTok, let's say, true crime, true crime, true crime, true crime, and this is true what happened. True crime video, true crime video, true crime video. Then I do a one-off video pretending that Michael Myers from Halloween was a real serial killer and playing it deadpan like he was real. That gets 1 million views in half an hour. That's what my new plethora of subscribers want to see. So I've got a choice then. Do I go back to doing true crime because that's what I want to do? That's what my page is. Or do I lean into it and do one on Freddy Krueger and Jason Voorhees? And then people start recommending other films to do. So your channel turns into something that it wasn't. And I'm seeing the ramifications of that right now because my TikTok following, I don't really post on there anymore anyway. But whenever I do, I post on true crime stuff. So all the hundreds of thousands of followers I got from the horror movie stuff or the creepy pasta stuff or the local weirdos stuff that I did, my following goes down every time I'm on there. I am losing subscribers left, right, and center because they didn't subscribe to that. So I just wondered if you, after a video does well, lean in more towards doing content on that did well, or do you still follow the path of doing whatever you want to do?
Well, I made a JFK clip, and so I was going to keep making JFK clips. So it just works out, I guess, on YouTube specifically. You can't make clips for Twitter. I don't know why. There's no way I would have ever said that. No, I think you mentioned followers on Twitter, and it just went from there. But what I'm saying here is that I was already making clips for YouTube on the same related content, so it just kind of works out. But also, when it comes to it's a different horse when you're talking about the JFK assassination because people who are interested in that are going to look through your channel before they subscribe. They're not just going to hit subscribe off a 1 minute clip. It's not going to happen. I've watched that because that based on the 300,000 something and compared to the numbers of subscribers, that's people that went through and looked to see if I was actually talking about this subject. And at the time I had posted this clip, it was a psychic that I had on. So they weren't, it was nothing JFK related. So I saw that affected that. But then when I posted another episode that was JFK related and that clip was still trending, which it is still 6 days later when we're recording this, then people started subscribing saying, okay, he's got JFK content. And then eventually they started realizing, okay, there's more than just one episode. There's a lot. And that's what YouTube told me. YouTube has gotten pretty good with its analytics now, where it's been able to, I don't know if it's because your subscribers go up, they start helping you out more because they realize that you might have some potential, or if it's just they're just getting better overall. But they've looked at it and they go, your overall content has gotten more views. So it's not just showing me that this one thing is the thing is trending, it's affecting the whole thing because I have the content already established out there. I mean, I could stop for 4 years and people will still have content to watch. So that's kind of like the purpose of like why I was trying to build up for so long. A lot of them are, I mean, you can scrap the first maybe 600, but it's why I try to make up for it again where I'm at now. I mean, I don't like anything I've done previous, but I think it's interesting because you really got to dive through something as a person, especially if you're interested about a subject. And a lot of people don't want to do that. They look at something, they like it, and then they think they're going to go back to it later because they're subscribed to it, and they go back to it, and it's nothing what they thought they subscribed to, which is like, as a human being, I don't know. For me, I monitor all that shit. Like I don't ever use my social medias, but I only follow things I'm actually interested in learning about or friends that I actually enjoy talking to. It's kind of like you have a personal Facebook and a personal Instagram. A lot of people just accept everybody. In my opinion, I keep all my shit private. So it's like I only accept you if I know you. Like I've had 40 something friend requests from high school, from people that either know of me, worked with me briefly. I'm like, I don't fucking know you. Sorry, I'm not adding you if I don't know you. We met at a bar. You spilled a fucking rum runner in my shoe. I'm not adding you. If
Yeah,
anything, I'm sending you
I've
my
got
fucking laundry
64 at the
bill.
moment. Same as you, 64 friend requests on my personal page. I only follow like 70
I
people.
got to be one of those on there. I sent you one a while back.
Did you? Did I not add you?
Still haven't accepted it.
It probably got lost among the thousands of people that
Bullshit.
want to follow me.
You just use me for my audience. That's what you do.
What would your username? No, I've just typed Rob into my follow request and Rob's not there on Instagram.
I found you had a camera in your profile picture.
Oh, that's my old photography page. That.
Ooh,
Yeah, I don't really
whoops.
go on that. I don't go on that anymore.
That's fair. Can we get back to you now?
Of course.
Okay. When we talk about murders and we talk
Okay.
about the killer and the victims,
Yeah.
what stops you from reporting on a subject?
Hmm. Not much.
Do you ever feel like
Not
your own
much.
personal
Some.
bias or
Uh,
perspective comes into the mix?
mm,
Yeah, obviously,
No,
or how old now? Like 30?
35 next month.
Okay, so you lived a life. Hopefully many more years to go. But we're talking about you've 35 years of experience and personal perspective is going to be influenced in some of the ways that you think and about just the world in general. So when you look at a subject and you're researching, your bias does end up getting seeped into it. Hopefully not so much, but you look at it and you kind of go, oh fuck, like I mean, why would you get in a van? Like it
Yeah,
doesn't make
it's.
sense.
I know what you mean. I try not to let that stuff. I think it's human nature to think that, and you will get people that think, well, what did they expect? But that's one of those dark thoughts that I mentioned earlier that everyone, admittedly, probably will think, even fleetingly. The only thing that would put me off doing an episode really is if it was really, really recent. Now, I'm not suggesting that time heals grieving. So, oh, well, they got murdered 15 years ago. You don't have a right to be upset that I covered the story. That's not what I'm suggesting. But if someone was just sent down last week for a murder that happened last year, probably in poor taste to do it so soon. That's the main factor that I would probably look at and think. There was the woman Lucy Letby, who we've definitely discussed before, the nurse that was sent down for killing
Yeah.
a load of babies. People, and this is one thing that pisses me off, is people jump on that bandwagon of popular stories and just push out episodes just purely for attention seeking purposes. There's a guy from the UK missing at the moment in Tenerife, and there's loads of suspicions and theories about, oh, it's all a hoax. And this is someone who apparently in a gang threatened someone with a machete recently. And idiots, in my opinion, idiots, have donated over £30,000 to a GoFundMe page to find this lad who was just, I don't know if he was in Ibiza or Tenerife, I think it was. And people are thinking it's drug related and that everyone's being conned. I just find it so weird that people donate to things like that, do you? Like if my car got stolen, so I've set up a GoFundMe page and people would probably donate to it. I think that's very strange. Do you
You're
not?
asking
The
my
good
opinion
net,
on it?
yeah, just the bit. I get that people are good natured and
I mean, I've had a guest come on and share, some of his true. This is a while ago too, and I knew something was off, and it's happened. Like I said, you will end up doing an episode on something, and you'll come out like someone will comment something. This person was this type of person, and you didn't know that at the time, and you were like, wait, what? And then you look it up, and you're like, oh my God! Like I've interviewed people that have been charged with murder. I've been interviewed people that I stuff I didn't know at the time. This is probably around episode 300. I was talking to a guy, Phil something, and he was going on about his podcast about the true crime, not true crime, ghost stuff and like that. And we talked about ghosts for a while. And at the ending, he kind of started saying that he was dealing with some medical issues and that's been very hard and difficult. And then he kind of started crying on air. And I felt really like, oh, I don't want to show any of this shit. And then after the episode was done, he wiped his tears real quick and he goes, when is this going to publish? And I was like, I don't know, man. It usually take about a week or so. And then as soon as I get like to my buddy's house, like I think the next day, I went over to his house and I started getting multiple messages. I mean, like 15 in a row. Like, when is the episode going to go up? You used me, all this type of stuff. And I was like, okay, there's something mentally wrong here. This is not a normal person that I'm interacting with anymore. And I said, bro, I told you the episodes take about 2 weeks before they go up. Back when I was recording like 15 a day. And I was like, it's gonna be a while. I'm sorry. And then, I eventually just I think it was like believe the later that night or the next day I posted the episode. And then I just like, here's the episode. Don't ever contact me again. The number of comments I got on that episode about this guy that had brought up the same story years before, it's been published in newspapers, was trying to scam people out of money. Um, he went to a hospital, it wasn't even his room. He laid in the hospital bed and took photos. Like it's a whole crazy scenario. And I was just like, I'm wiping my hands with this and dusting it off. I don't know what to do. I didn't know it at the time. It's not like I would have talked to him if I would have known he would have been like that. There was no point in him even mentioning it to me. But it's no, it's up there. I don't ever take down an episode unless a guest asks me, specifically. If you ask me before I post it, I do not mind. But if I post it, I will have to change the name of it and try and find a way to remove the video because I'm not messing up my backlog. There are a couple episodes that we'll skip. One episode has been taken down from YouTube, and then out of the other ones, I think I've privated two based on one of them was with a teacher, and he was like, "Hey man, like on our show we don't use our names or video." And I didn't really think about it at the time, but some of my students started finding me on your thing. And this is back when when you first met me, like when we were really going out there and having fun with the whole shit. Talking about motels and all that type of crazy shit. But this guy had said a bunch of crazy fun stuff like he does on his improv comedy podcast, and he didn't think his students were going to be able to look him up. And then he really got in some deep shit with it. So I said, "Yeah, man, it's a personal thing. I'll do that for you." And I just privated it. And then I kept it on Spotify and everything, but I just changed his names all around because back then there was no video before like 700. Um, so I can go back and replace those and do all that, but there's not a point. Um, but there's stuff like that that I'll kind of do that. But I think I've had 3 episodes that I can't post on my computer, um, that are people that are no longer with us, that are very important JFK people. Um, and it was weird. I had one where the guy had died and I found out about it and I had his episode saved on my computer. Just never posted. It just wasn't a good interaction. Sometimes you jive, sometimes you don't. And the email had sent me an email like, did we do a recording? And I was like, is this the fucking afterlife? Holy shit. I was like, comment, I was like, I just said something like you're dead. And they were like, can I get the recording? And I was like, I don't know who this is. No. And I just cut off all contact to it. I think it was a personal friend of the guy. Um, but everyone's like, yeah, you should post it if you talk to him because he's very known in like the studying of intelligence activities, like a popular academic. And I was like, I'm not going to post the content afterwards to be stupid. It would just be for views and it doesn't make sense to me to do that.
I get that. I mean, I don't think I would ever. I have interviews from time to time. I don't think I would ever entertain interviewing a murderer personally. You know,
You wouldn't want to
because I,
go interview Mark David Chapman? I would kill for that.
I don't know who that is.
The guy who killed John Lennon.
Oh, is his man? Mark Chapman. Yeah, you said David threw me off there.
Yeah, Mark
Is
David
that?
Chapman. That's his name.
I know him as Mark Chapman in the UK.
No.
What was he reading? Catcher in the Rye or something?
Yeah. And
That
there
was it.
was
Yeah.
weird things. That was his second time. He told his wife the first time he was going to go kill John Lennon and he was going to take a plane ticket. He bought the plane ticket and never got off the plane. You would think after the first time the wife would be like, "Hey, let's go to fucking the mental hospital, you psycho."
Yeah. Yeah. I don't. I wouldn't want to give them the platform. I feel like it would be unnecessarily well giving them airtime
I would have
when
interviewed
they've.
OJ about Naked Gun, but that guy died. You know how many messages I got about that? They were like, "I'm so sorry you lost your dream guest." I was like, "Damn it, people. This is what we were gonna miss out on."
You can't just speak to OJ about Naked Gun for
Yes,
Christ's
I
sake.
can. That's all. I just specifically didn't look into the murder because all I wanted to do was watch. I watched Naked Gun the other day and he was in it. And there were all these babies going down the steps and he was catching them because they were like flying. And then he was like dancing with one, doing a touchdown dance. He went to go spike it, and a woman was gonna come up and tell him, "No, no, no, no." He's like, "I'm so sorry." I was like, "That's all right." Off the subject here. When we look and examine kind of like the whole true crime interest, I mean, do you still have the spark that you had in the beginning when you're talking about the subject? I mean, obviously you're still learning, but when it comes to the whole learning about the community, the people that are interested in the subject, obviously it pulls in strong personalities and it kind of pulls in people that are interested in the content. Do you ever feel like it's just getting old, or you keep trying to find ways to spice it up?
I think my interest has waned over the past almost 4 years because I'm 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 not diagnosed anything, but I get ultra fixated on things and then I tend to give them up forever.
Called a
So the fact that
hyperfocus, and it's a part of ADHD.
okay, I'll take that then, doctor. But
Well, I've only done like 200 episodes on ADHD because
I
I
know,
have
I
it.
know,
So
I know. But yeah, the fact that I've stuck with something so long naturally to me. I think anything you do, no matter if you work in your dream job or if you're playing a sport that you love, everything, in my opinion, loses its appeal after a certain period of time. It could be 6 months, it could be 6 decades. Because it's like Groundhog Day, isn't it? Everything is typically. So I think since the podcast has become so popular, it's turned from being a hobby, something I did for fun in my part time, spare time, to something that needs to happen. So I have an audience now that expects an episode every single Thursday. So it's almost like I have a deadline now. So it's balancing when I put the time in to research that and edit it and record it, balancing that with personal life, which at the start I was terrible at because I was doing it on an evening, on a weekend. I wasn't spending time with my family. And you think, now I look back and I think that's good. I put the graft in. Now I've got the audience. I'm established as much as I can be, really. But then you start thinking, you're never happy with the level that you're at. What's the next level? Like you've said, what's the next level? What's the next step? But I'm at the moment where I'm thinking, why can't you just be happy with where you are right now? What's wrong with that? You've got an audience. They love your content. They engage with it. It performs well. You're enjoying doing it. It's respectful. It's not causing too much stress. You're still spending time with your family, your friends. You got a roof over it. Do you know what I mean? Rather than me thinking, oh, I really need to crack YouTube so I can get that extra money. You think, oh, extra money for what? What's the next? What do I want to be a celebrity now? Do I want to earn 5 grand a week? Why? You've got a really successful podcast, and this is me talking to myself here. You wake up sometimes and you think, oh, just quit. What's the point? And just go back to doing what everyone else does, just work a 9 to 5. There's nothing wrong with that. I've done it all my life. But you've actually built something yourself. But when you're the only person you're relying on, it's quite easy to quit because you think, well, no one will know. It's fine. You did it all yourself. You can just disappear. It's a long-winded way of saying that my interest has waned, but it's as a direct result of getting to where I thought I wanted to be. And now I'm there. I have to remind myself that that's fine. That's fine. You've achieved it. You were going to quit after season 10 when you started, or 100 episodes. Now you're on 250, season 14, and it's still going. Every week, new cases are coming in. New listeners are finding me. Why you think, what's next? Oh, let's spend a week doing a YouTube video every single week. Bring the stress levels back up just so I can get a few thousand views and maybe get an extra £100 a month. Why? You know what I mean?
I can
That's
give
like
you
my inner monologue just released on your show there.
I can give you a minute here to be able to promote your links, but do you want to hear the murder story I got?
I'll hear it.
So
Go
I
for it.
was at work and a guy from a different club about probably the state over from me, because they own like multiple locations, had said to me, "Hey, did you hear about the new person they got in the child care facility down there?" I was like, "No, because I don't work ever at your facility." And they were like, "Oh yeah, her son's a serial killer." I was like, what? And the guy started describing the murder, and I realized I had seen it on a TikTok, and they made a documentary about it. The mother who works for the facility that I work for, she runs the child care now. Her son had chopped off a guy's head, and she found it in his closet and put the head into a sink and called 911. The son is serving whatever life sentence and everything like that. Yeah, but she works for my work. And you always think about, you hear these stories about people and you never think you're going to come across them because they're always out in like the middle of like bumfuck nowhere. And next thing you know, you hear it and you're like, this is in my state. What? And then I asked, I was like, wait a minute. So this person works? And they're like, yeah, yeah. And I was like, who hired them? It turns out it's my old boss. And I was like, he didn't do a background check. Like nobody would have ever thought that'd be in a background check. And I was like, but I was like, really, I asked, I was like, man, you get into like, is it genetic? What is it? And I was like, does she have another kid? And he goes, yeah. And I go, younger or older? And they go, younger. And I go, is he a little eh? And the guy goes, yeah, he's a little weird too. And I go, dude, just get your tubes tied. That's all you got to do. Stop spawning Satans. That's nuts that you have two kids that are, you're two for two, literally, in the psychopath department. She's apparently really nice. So hopefully I'll get to meet her one day and be like, yeah, real quick, tell me about it. What was it like? No, but it was interesting to me. I just thought it was a cool tidbit. So I got down this weird interest recently, like true crime shit, and that's why I wanted to have you back on. So I wanted to have a bunch of people back on because yeah, there is a large interest in our society. But I always wondered why. And I think a lot of people do. We necessarily don't have an answer to it, but it's just fascinating to everyone.
Definitely. I've had a few forensic psychiatrists or psychologists on the show, and I've asked them similar questions, and even they can't pinpoint it really. It's just a morbid fascination with something that's so unfamiliar with everyday life. And I think that's pretty much the long and short of it. With that woman, though, do you not think, playing devil's advocate here, that her, she, I don't know, it's hard because she's her mum, she's his mum, but should she be judged based on that, in your
No, no,
opinion?
100% not. No. I watched the documentary. I was horrified that that could have happened. A lot of people started pointing in the documentary about her neglect to her son, her husband's neglect to the son. But I'm like, yeah, but that's every parent at a point in a kid's life. Your kid becomes distant or you're working so much. And both these people were working all the time. So it's not anything against her as a mother. Sometimes kids just something happens to them. And I think a lot of people, when you're looking at a true crime case, they always want to blame either a parent or they want to look for some horrible thing in childhood. Necessarily, the person could just been born fucked up. I hate to say it like that, but it happens sometimes. I know plenty of kids. I think we all know people that we went to school with or something, and then someone tells you, "Hey, you know about Mark? Well, what's up with Mark? Oh, Mark, he's a cop now." And you're like, "Oh my God, that guy's a cop." You're scared. And I think that's just, you have to kind of weigh that in your head when you're looking at cases like this. But Stuart, I have to go here in a minute. But is there a place where people can find your link? So I'm gonna give you a second to be able to promote it. And I always do appreciate our conversations.
Cool, thanks for having me again. Just go to britishmurders.com. Everything is on there. Links to my episodes are on there. Links to my socials are on there. If you want to subscribe, go ahead. If you think I sound like a prick, don't bother.
Still subscribe anyway.
Still subscribe, but I'm quite like Marmite. People either think he sounds like a twat or he sounds really okay. So whichever one you think, I appreciate you listening and for you having me on, Robbie. It's been a pleasure as always. BritishMurders.com.
BritishMers.com, folks. I will link that in the description. Thank you for listening. And I guess stay tuned for another episode of Out of the Blank. Thanks for maintaining your viewership.